7:05 Eastern, Monday on TBS.
Fans call him Bogey, but what does the son of Humphrey Bogart have to say about his father? All the world's a stage for this week's TBS Super Citizen and Howard Finster's Paradise Garden. Today on Between the Lines. Good morning and welcome to Between the Lines. I'm Karen Duva. In his lifetime, Humphrey Bogart played many roles. He was Sam Spade, the private investigator in The Maltese Falcon. In Casablanca, he played Rick Blaine, a nightclub owner. And in The African Queen, he was unforgettable as Charlie Allnut. If you're a fan, you probably have your own favorite Bogart character. But there's one role you may not associate with Bogey the tough guy, and that's Humphrey Bogart the father. It wasn't his most famous role, but according to his son, Stephen Humphrey Bogart, it was his most important one. Stephen Bogart has just written a book about his famous father. It's called Bogart, In Search of My Father. And Dave Michaels recently spoke with him about his new book at Atlanta's fabulous Fox Theater. Let's watch.
The Left Hand of God, starring Humphrey Bogart. That was a 20th Century Fox film in CinemaScope. One of the great films that obviously showed at this theater back when I was dating, and this was a great place to take a date. It wasn't one of 18 theaters in a shopping center. It was a grand old castle-like house that showed only the best pictures. Right now, let's go inside and meet the son of the man I mentioned. And this is the gentleman I'm mentioning. This is Stephen Bogart,
Hi, Dave.
who is the son of Humphrey Bogart, and you've had to live with that your whole life, haven't you? That's kind of a weight you've carried on your back.
Yeah, it started when my father was died in 1957. I remember coming up to the church and hordes of people and media all over the place. And that was the first time that I felt the scrutiny that I would continue to get from being my father's son. And it took a long time to get through that.
And the rest of your life, people have had to come up to you and say, you know who you are. You're Bogey's son.
Well, it's true. Nobody's ever come up and said, well, you look like Humphrey Bogart. But the minute they find out who I am, they say, oh, yeah, you've got your mother's eyes, you've got your father's lower, you know, below the nose on my father and above the nose on my mother, I think.
The book, In Search of My Father.
Yes.
Got to get the title correct. You mentioned a scene, there's a moment in your life. You were 8 years old when your father
when he died.
You were taken by Sybil Burton to a movie theater in the Los Angeles area.
Yes.
And you lived in a life that most kids don't grow up in.
That's true.
And you got into the theater, not probably unlike this Fox Theater, and you said,
whose house is this? Yeah, and Sybil Burton, who was married to Richard Burton at the time, who was a good friend of the family. And I guess that comes from living in big houses, you know,
not knowing how the other kids lived.
Right. And of course, now I know there were, you know, through all the problems that I've had, there are so many people who'd want to trade places with me. But this is my story from my perspective.
Let's go upstairs. Have you been inside this theater?
No, I haven't at all.
It's gorgeous.
Oh, I bet
Fox
it is.
Theater here. Let's take a look.
Sure.
Well, here it is. It's a great-looking place, isn't it?
Oh,
I guess this is why they call it a film palace.
It's incredible.
The old Moorish architecture. Yeah. It opened as a Yarib temple in the 20s.
Really?
And then they started to show pictures in it somewhere in the 30s. I used to take dates here. This was a great place for a date.
Oh,
this
I bet it
lower
was.
section right here.
I'll bet it was.
Can you remember the first theater you took a date to?
You know, I don't, but I think if it had been like this one, I don't think I would have gone home alone that night.
And just think of how many dates have come and gone from this theater over the years and theaters like it. And how many hours people have spent in the dark watching people like your father.
I think back to the number of hours that I've spent in the dark watching films my whole life and thinking about my father and mother.
This book, titled In Search of My Father, you've kind of been ignoring the fact that your dad was Humphrey Bogart. I mean, that's something most people don't have to carry around with them. But your wife, Barbara,
Yes.
told you to go looking for your dad.
Yeah, she did. She did. It's my mother had been talking to me about doing this for a long time, and of course, kids never listened to their mothers and fathers. And, but it took me a long time. And when I met Barbara, and I had 2 more children, Richard and Brooke, I felt comfortable in that part of my life, and I felt comfortable in my career. And I think at some point in your life, you need to, whether it's maturity or whether it's age, you need to deal with the problems you've had in the past in order to go on. And as Barbara continued to talk to me and tried to get me to do it, I finally felt inside me that it was time to exorcise those demons and to go back and to find out about my father, and from that came the book.
Did you ever just sit and watch any of your dad's pictures and try to find them in those films?
No, but you know, I was looking at home videos. My mom has a lot of home videos, right. And I was looking at home and I saw my father in the home videos, and all of a sudden I see me there. Right. And I'm going, what am I doing in the home? Did I tape over this? And I must have turned it back 3 or 4 times. And finally, I realized that that was actually my father, and that was the first time that's ever happened to me. But my father, you know, finding him in films wasn't very, very difficult, the ones that I've said, the ones that I see, because he was right there.
Did you ever, in looking at the pictures and some of the old films of your father, is there a string that runs through all the pictures where you think you really see the real guy?
That's a good question. As I think about it, I would say that yes, and I'd say that the string was his genuineness. He was not a phony, and he was not a fake. And I think that came through in everything that he did. His emotions seemed genuine. When he's Captain Queeg rolling the balls and he's starting to stutter and talking about the strawberries, or when he's Charlie Allnut and he's got the leeches on him. I mean, these are, and Fred C. Dobbs in my favorite film, The Treasure,
I love that.
With the gold, and you could just see, I mean, you could see the greed, and you could see the fear, and you could see the craziness in all 3 of those, and I think that it was the reality of those feelings that really came through.
You have some wonderful pictures in the book, and we have a few of them here. This is on the beach. Where is that?
This is on the beach in Hawaii during a 2-week break that my father had from filming the Caine Mutiny. And I went there, and I was lucky enough. And
Michael Caine named himself after your dad's picture.
That's right, he did. He did. And we had a nice vacation, I guess. I look happy.
Do you remember any of this?
Not really. I do remember, I'll tell you, I remember walking on the beach with a guy named Molokai.
This is a wonderful picture. I have a feeling it's been posed for a magazine of some sort, but it's a neat shot of your dad, yourself, and the Santana.
And the Santana, and the Oscar. The 1951 Oscar on top for African Queen. And as a matter of fact, the boat is still alive in San Francisco at the St. Francis Yacht Club, and this model is in my mother's apartment in New York.
I was going to ask you about the model.
Absolutely. When I get a big enough house, I can have the model, but I can't now.
At the funeral services, in lieu of your father was being cremated at that moment, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And the boat, the model, was there in the church.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, here's another photograph. Very young.
Oh, there I am, and there's my father, and he looks like he actually may be about to change a diaper, but I don't know about that, but there we are. I look to be, what, 8, 9 months old?
Yeah, you're young.
I'll tell you. It brings back memories.
Early on in the book, you talk about what you've had to go through as the son of Bogart. Bogey.
Yes.
Do you ever get called Bogey?
Sometimes, by my friends.
By friends.
And it doesn't bother me if they're friends. You know, people joke and say, hey, Bogey, and you learn to live with stuff like that, and that's not a problem. My problem was when my father died, and as I had said, everybody knew about it, and I continually tried to get away from that. People would ask me, people would say, well, you're Steve Bogart, are you related? And I'd say, no, this is when I was living in Connecticut. No, if I were related, I'd be living in a mansion in L.A. Or I'd say, no, my fans were big fans of his, and he named his son Steve, so they named me Steve. Right. And it worked, and this was a way to just deflect this stuff and to try to find out who I was.
Your dad had to put up with people coming up to him and trying to see if he was as tough as he was in the pictures.
Yes.
You talked about that in your book. Did you ever have that happen?
No.
Somebody wants to give you a hard time?
You know, I'll tell you, I really haven't. I think it's where you go, but I never had that.
Don't hang out in those places.
Don't hang out in those places, and that stuff won't happen. Exactly, exactly.
Right, yeah. Your father, if he were alive, would he be proud of what you've been doing? I mean, you ever think about what he would think about you today?
You know, I have thought about that. As a matter of fact, in the last couple of weeks, and I think he would have been. You know, he was a guy who was not perfect, as none of us are. But I think that in toto, I think he would have been proud, because I think I'm a pretty good father. I took a while, but I finished school, and I've been working hard, and I think that that's important to him. I mean, I'm a pretty truthful person, and I'm a pretty honest and genuine person. I like to think anyway. And so I think that he would have been proud of that. He didn't necessarily think that you needed to make a lot of money or that you needed to be famous in order to be successful. His motto
happened,
was,
though.
it happened for him, but it was his motto that you do the best you can at what you do, and if you do that, then you're successful.
Listen, we can't leave this without talking about your mother, Betty Bacall,
Yes.
or film-wise, Lauren Bacall,
Yes.
who I always think is probably a very frank kind of lady. Probably tells exactly what she says. And
Oh, she's a toughie, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah,
What did she
does.
think about your book?
She liked the fact that I went back and looked and did it, and she wrote the foreword for the book. She didn't agree with my perceptions, but we were speaking from different angles. I mean, to her, my father was her father figure, was her mentor, was her lover, was everything, and he died at the height of their relationship. To me, I was looking at a father who I really didn't know, and I needed to find out about him. So I had to move back, and I had to go before they met. And there were some things that he was doing back then that she didn't really see. The relationship with Mayo, and you know, he loved to have a drink, and he still did with her, but I think he toned it down with her. And so things like that, she was a little uncomfortable with, but she was supportive of it in the end.
I have one other book. I'm doing another book inside another book interview, but we mentioned this earlier. We did.
That's right.
We went on.
Nat Benchley, a great friend of my father.
Nat Benchley. See, I love the name Nathaniel. I would not know him as Nat Benchley.
I didn't either, but that's how
I did this
I've grown up.
interview when I was doing AM Los Angeles many years ago.
Fantastic.
And he wrote this to me, and I love the sound of it. To Dave Michaels, with a low Bogartian leer.
If I could write like that, I'd really be doing well.
There's been a lot of coffee tables.
That's a famous picture, too, on the front of that. That is a very famous picture.
Great picture.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have that.
You describe swimming out to the boat, the Santa Ana?
Santana,
Santana,
yes.
and making it, and your dad being very proud. Did you complete in that swim? You've been swimming toward your dad for years. Did you complete that swim? Did you find your dad?
I did, and I did finally find it, and I'm comfortable with what I found. I think that he was real. He was a smart guy. He liked classical music.
Right.
He was well-read, chess player, sailor. He was just an all-around decent person, it
chess in
seems.
Casablanca.
Placing chess in Casablanca, and when he was off the set in Casablanca, he would carry on a number of games via mail. Now it's computers, of course.
It's refreshing to hear a son of a famous film star write a good book about their dad and find somebody who's had real value and not have to tell a lot of really ugly stories.
No,
There's been a lot of books like that.
I hate them, and I wouldn't do that, and I think that's part of what's happening today.
I was very touched by your book. I found my dad in your book, too.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Stephen Bogart, the son of Humphrey Bogart. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Stephen.